Hey, eighth grade. So, where we left off in Howl's Moving Castle was that Sophie has entered Howl's castle, and we met our first character, Michael, who's an apprentice for the Wizard Howl, and he grudgingly has invited her to stay and wait for Mr. Howl. Wizard Howl, sorry. In the middle of the night, Sophie was woken by someone snoring. She jumped upright, rather irritated to discover that she was the one who had been snoring. It seemed to her that she had only dropped off for a second or so, but Michael seemed to have vanished in those seconds, taking the light with him. No doubt a wizard's apprentice learned to do that kind of thing in his first week. And he had left the fire very low. It was giving out irritating hissings and poppings. A cold draft blew on Sophie's back. Sophie recalled that she was in a wizard's castle, and also, with unpleasant distinctiveness, that there was a human skull on the workbench somewhere behind her. She shivered and cranked her stiff old neck around, but there was only darkness behind her. "Let's have a bit more light, shall we?" she said, and her cracked little voice seemed to make no more noise than the crackling of the fire. Sophie was surprised. She had expected it to echo through the vaults of the castle. Still, there was a basket of logs beside her. She stretched out a creaking arm and heaved a log on the fire, which sent a spray of green and blue sparks flying up the chimney. She heaved on a second log and sat back, not without a nervous look or so behind her, where the purple-blue light from the fire was dancing over the polished brown bone of the skull. The room was quite small. There was no one in it but Sophie and the skull. "He's got both feet in the grave, and I've only got one," she consoled herself. She turned back to the fire, which was now flaring up into blue and green flames. "Must be salt on that wood," Sophie murmured. She settled herself more comfortably, putting her knobby feet on the fender and her head into the corner of the chair, where she could stare into the colored flames, and began dreamily considering what she thought to do in the morning. But she was sidetracked a little by imagining a face in the flames. "It would be a thin blue face," she murmured, "very long and thin, with a thin blue nose. But those curly green flames on top are most definitely your hair. Suppose I didn't go until Howl gets back. Wizards can lift spells, I suppose. And those purple flames near the bottom make your mouth. You have a savage teeth, my friend. You've got two green tufts of flame for eyebrows." Curiously enough, the only orange flames in the fire were under the green eyebrow flames, just like eyes, and they had a little purple glint in the middle that Sophie could almost imagine was looking at her, like the pupil of an eye. "On the other hand," Sophie continued, looking into the orange flames, "if the spell was off, I'd have my heart eaten before I could turn around." "Don't you want your heart eaten?" asked the fire. It was definitely the fire that spoke. Sophie saw its purple mouth move as the words came. Its voice was nearly as cracked as her own, full of the spitting and whining of burning wood. "Naturally I don't," Sophie answered. "What are you?" "A fire demon," answered the purple mouth. There was more whine than spit to its voice as it said, "I'm bound to this hearth by my contract. I can't break from the spot." Then its voice became brisk and crackling. "And what are you?" it asked. "I can see that you're under a spell." This roused Sophie from her dreamlike state. "You see?" she exclaimed. "Can you take the spell off?" There was a popping, blazing silence while the orange eyes and the demon's waveringly blue face traveled up and down Sophie. "It's a strong spell," it said at length. "It feels like one of the Witch of the Waste to me." "It is," said Sophie. "But it seems more than that," cackled the demon. "I detect 2 layers, and of course you won't be able to tell anyone about it unless they know already." It gazed at Sophie a moment longer. "I shall have to study it," it said. "How long will that take?" Sophie asked. "It may take a while," said the demon, and it added in a soft, persuasive flicker, "How about making a bargain with me? I'll break your spell if you agree to break this contract that I'm under." Sophie looked wearily at the demon's thin blue face. It had a distinctively cunning look as it made this proposal. Everything she had read showed the extreme danger of making a bargain with a demon. And there was no doubt that this one did look extraordinarily evil. Those long purple teeth. "Are you sure you're being quite honest?" she said. "Not completely," admitted the demon. "But do you want to stay like that until you die? That spell has shortened your life by 60 years, if I am any judge of these things." That was a nasty thought, and one which Sophie had tried not to think about up till now. It made quite the difference. "This contract you're under," she said, "is it with Wizard Howl?" "Of course," said the demon. Its voice took on a bit of a whine again. "I'm fastened to this hearth, and I can't stir so much as a foot away. I'm forced to do the most of the magic around here. I have to maintain the castle and keep it moving and do all the special effects that scare people off, as well as anything else Howl wants. Howl's quite heartless, you know." Sophie did not need telling that Howl was heartless. On the other hand, the demon was probably quite as wicked. "Don't you get anything out of this contract at all?" she said. "I wouldn't have entered into it if I didn't," said the demon, flickering sadly. "But I wouldn't have done it if I'd known what it would have been like. I'm being exploited." In spite of her caution, Sophie felt a good deal of sympathy for the demon. She thought of herself making hats for Fanny while Fanny went off gadding. "All right," she said. "What are the terms of the contract? How do I break it?" An eager purple grin spread across the demon's blue face. "You agree to a bargain?" "If you agree to break the spell on me," Sophie said, with a brave sense of saying something fatal. "Done," cried the demon, and his long face leaping gleefully up the chimney. "I'll break your spell the very instant you break my contract." "Then tell me how to break your contract," Sophie said. The orange eyes glinted at her and looked away. "I can't. Part of the contract is that neither the wizard nor I can say what the main clause is." And Sophie saw now that she had been tricked. She opened her mouth to tell the demon that it could sit in the fireplace until doomsday in that case. The demon realized she was going to. "Don't be hasty," it cackled. "You can find out what it is if you watch and listen carefully. I implore you to try. The contract isn't doing any of us either of us any good in the long run, and I do keep my word. The fact that I'm stuck here shows that I keep it." It was in earnest, leaping about on its logs in an agitated way. Sophie felt again a great deal of sympathy. "But if I'm to watch and listen, that means I have to stay here in Howell's castle," she objected. "Only about a month. Remember, I have to study your spell too," the demon pleaded. "But what possible excuse can I give for doing that?" Sophie asked. "We'll think of one. Hal's pretty useless at most things, in fact," the demon said, venomously hissing. "He's too wrapped up in himself to see beyond his nose half the time. We can deceive him, as long as you'll agree to stay." "Very well," Sophie said. "I'll stay. Now find an excuse." She settled herself comfortably in the chair while the demon thought. It thought aloud in a little crackling, flickering murmur, which reminded Sophie rather of the way she had talked to her stick when she walked here. And it blazed while it thought, with such a glad and powerful roaring that she dozed again. She thought the demon did make a few suggestions. She remembered shaking her head to the motion that she should pretend to be Howell's long-lost great-aunt, and to one or two other ones even more far-fetched. But she did not remember very clearly. The demon at length fell to singing a gentle flickering little song. It was not in any language Sophie knew, or she thought not, until she distinctly heard the word saucepan in it several times, and it was very sleepy sounding. Sophie fell into a deep sleep, with a slight suspicion that she was being bewitched now, as well as being beguiled, but it did not bother her particularly. She would be free of the spell soon. And that's where we'll stop for today. Tomorrow we'll start at chapter 4, in which Sophie discovers several strange things. Bye, guys.